When my wife died, my daughter stole the inheritance of our house and lands. Then she threw me out saying, "Find a nursing home to live in, this is no longer your house." Days later, I laughed when I read the will, and my daughter turned pale. The sound I missed the most wasn't her laughter, or her voice singing in the kitchen while she kneaded Sunday bread. No, the sound that tore through the silence of the house, that made every room feel like an empty echo of a happy past, was the soft click-clack of her sewing machine. It was a metronome sound, constant, the heartbeat of our home. Now there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old mansion's timbers, sounds that couldn't hope to fill the void left by Clara's death. When my wife died, the world was painted in a permanent shade of gray. 60 years of marriage don't vanish with a last breath. They transfer to every object, every corner, every particle of dust, dancing in a sunbeam. This house, our house, wasn't just a building of stone and oak beams. It was the physical archive of our life. On the fireplace mantel in the living room, I could still see the soot stain from 1965, when I'd tried to make a romantic fire and nearly burned the house down. Clara laughed for weeks. On the kitchen doorframe, the pencil marks measuring the height of our daughter, Elena, and later our granddaughter, Laura, were like the rings of a tree telling the story of our family. And now, that story was shattering. It was a cold, damp November afternoon. The light was low, golden and sad, filtering through the dining room's large windows and illuminating the dust settling on the furniture like a layer of oblivion. I was in her armchair, Clara's, the worn velvet one, that still held the faint scent of lavender and her. I held a cup of tea in my trembling hands, now gone cold. My fingers, knuckles swollen with arthritis, clung to the porcelain like a lifeline. The photograph on the side table showed the three of us, Clara, radiant in a floral dress, me younger, with more hair and fewer wrinkles, an arm around her, and Elena, about 7 years old, smiling with a gap in her baby teeth. A family, a unit. The front door opened with a screech that made me shudder. It wasn't the soft, affectionate sound of someone coming home, but a cold, announced entry, firm footsteps in heels on the hydraulic tile floor. I recognized the rhythm. Elena. I didn't move. I heard her drop her heavy purse on the console table in the hall, how she took off her coat. Her footsteps headed for the dining room. She stopped in the doorway. I saw her from the corner of my eye. She looked impeccable, as always, an expensive black pantsuit, her hair pulled back into a perfect bun that didn't allow a single strand out of place. Her posture was rigid. Her gloved hands held a leather folder. "Father," she said. It was a statement, not a greeting. "Elena," I murmured, not taking my eyes off the photograph. "Have you eaten? There's some broth in the fridge." She ignored my question. Her eyes, the same clear, penetrating ones as her mother's, but without the warmth that made them shine, scanned the room with disdain. "This place is dusty. It smells musty." "It smells of memories," I corrected softly. She sighed. A sound of contained exasperation. She walked to the large oak table, the same one where we'd celebrated Christmas dinners, birthdays, where Elena had done her homework and Clara had cut fabric patterns. She placed the folder on the polished wood with a sharp thud that echoed in the silence. "We need to talk about important matters," she announced. Her tone was the one she used in her business meetings, flat, impersonal. "This situation can't continue." Finally, I turned my head to look at her. My dear girl, my only daughter, in her chiseled, perfectly made-up face. I looked for a glimpse of the girl who ran through the garden with muddy knees. I found nothing. "What situation, Elena?" "This," she said, making a broad gesture that encompassed the room, the house, and me. "You living here alone, in this huge house that's falling apart. It's not safe, it's not practical. Look at your hands, father. You can barely hold that cup. What will happen if you fall, if something happens to you? Your mother and I managed just fine for 60 years, I said, with a tenacity that surprised even me. I know every crack in this house. It's my home. Not anymore. The phrase shot from her lips like a whip. She bit her lower lip, as if regretting the vehemence, and adopted her cold, rational tone again. I mean, things have changed. Mom is gone. And you need care, professional care. She took some papers out of the folder. She slid them across the table toward me. I've been making inquiries. There are wonderful residences, father. The San Miguel residence, on the outskirts of the city. It has beautiful gardens, activities, 24-hour nursing. It's for the best. My eyes, clouded by age and sadness, tried to focus on the colorful brochures showing smiling elderly people playing cards or strolling through impeccable gardens. It looked like a catalog for a happy fake life, a waiting place. I don't need that, I said, pushing the papers away with a clumsy gesture. I have Maria, who comes 3 times a week to clean and shop for me, and I have my memories. They're enough. Maria is a cleaner. Elena burst out, finally losing her composure. Her cheeks flushed. She's not a nurse. She's not family. And what memories? Are you going to live off crumbs from the past? Look around, father. This is a museum of dust and sorrow. I stood up slowly, leaning on the arms of the chair. My bones protested. I looked her in the eye, defiant. This museum is all I have left of your mother, and it's my house. She held my gaze. Her expression hardened further, as if a layer of ice sealed over her emotions. She took a deep breath. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, she said, and her voice regained that dangerous calm. She picked up another document from the folder. It was thicker, official. I recognized the letterhead of a law firm. After Mom's passing, the inheritance must be dealt with, the assets. A shiver ran down my spine. The inheritance. Elena, your mother only wanted us to be well, the two of us, to take care of each other. Exactly, she said, and a small, tense smile played on her lips. And for our well-being, and to secure the future, I've made some decisions. Difficult decisions, but necessary. She pointed to the document. I've consulted with my lawyers. This house, the adjoining lands. Mom didn't leave a specific will, since everything was in both your names, jointly owned, and upon her death, the property passes to the forced heirs. That is you and me. I have exercised my right, and with the power of attorney you granted me when Mom fell ill, you remember, to handle the paperwork, I have initiated proceedings for the sale of the property. It's the most sensible thing. The money will be split between us. With your share you can pay for a top-tier residence for many, many years. The world stopped. The words bounced around in my mind. Absurd, impossible to assemble into a coherent meaning. Sale, power of attorney, residence. Are you talking about selling the house? The question came out as a hoarse whisper, barely audible. It's the logical thing, father. The value of this property is enormous. The land alone is worth a fortune. Maintaining it is an absurd expense for one person. It's an asset that must be monetized. It's our home, I shouted, and the force of my own voice made me stagger. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. It's where you were born, where you grew up, where your mother lived and died. It's not an asset. Stop being sentimental, she retorted, slamming her palm on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. Sentimentality doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't keep you warm at night. Mom is dead, father. It's over. We have to move on. Move on by tearing down everything we built? My eyes filled with tears of rage and disbelief. Is that what we taught you? To throw away the old when it's no longer useful? She didn't answer. She simply took another paper and put it in front of me. It was a sales contract. It already had a signature in the seller's section. I found a buyer, a real estate company. They're offering a very competitive price. We need your signature. I looked at her, and for a brief second, I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Doubt? Remorse? Maybe it was just the reflection of the evening light, but it went out immediately. No, I said, with a firmness that came from the depths of my being. I won't sign, never. The tense smile returned to her lips. It was a horrible grimace. This isn't a request, Father. It's a formality. The easy way. I came today to explain it to you, to make you understand, to make it easier. Easier for what? She took a deep breath. The sale will proceed, with or without your cooperation. My lawyers will handle everything. The power you gave me is quite broad, and regarding your housing situation, she paused dramatically, measuring the effect of her words. Unfortunately, since the property is in the process of sale and is no longer a safe environment for you, I have decided you must move out. I've reserved a room at the San Miguel residence. You can move next week. The floor seemed to open beneath my feet. I clung to the chair with all my strength, fearing my legs would give way. Are you throwing me out of my own house? Don't call it that. I call it relocating you for your own well-being, she said, adjusting a glove with a precise tug. You have 7 days to pack your personal belongings, only the strictly necessary. The rest will be liquidated with the sale. The disbelief turned into a pain, so deep and wrenching it left me breathless. The tears I had held back since Clara's death finally welled up, hot and silent, tracing paths down my wrinkled cheeks. Elena, please, what did your mother and I do to you to deserve this? Is it about the money? Is that it? Do you need it that much? For a moment, something broke in her mask. I saw a rapid blink, a twitch in her jaw, but then her gaze turned to steel. This isn't personal, Father. It's common sense. It's business. She turned on her heel and started walking toward the door. She stopped in the doorway, not turning to look at me. 7 days. I'll pick you up Monday at 10 sharp. Be reasonable. Don't make this harder than it already is. And she left. Her heels clacked down the hallway, the sound fading until the front door slammed shut. The bang echoed through the silent house. A final, definitive echo. I collapsed into the armchair, defeated. The pain was physical, an immense weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. My daughter, my own flesh and blood. She had stolen my home, my past, my future. She had stripped me of everything left of Clara, with the coldness of firing an incompetent employee. Business. The word burned inside me. The following days were a blur of gray fog. Maria came, and seeing my state, cried with me. She tried to call Elena, but only managed to get fired over the phone with rudeness. Don't meddle in what doesn't concern you, Maria. The cleaner's solidarity, a woman who had barely known us for a couple of years, was the only ray of warmth in a world that had turned brutally cold. I didn't leave the house. I spent the hours sitting in Clara's armchair, stroking her old shawl, which still smelled of her. I looked at the photographs, walked through the halls with my fingertips, saying goodbye to every crack, every shadow. I resisted packing. It was a surrender my heart refused to accept. One afternoon, rummaging through drawers in the study, looking for an old pair of glasses, I stumbled upon a lacquered wooden box at the back of a closet. Clara called it her treasure box. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, there were worthless little jewels, love letters we had written to each other as youngsters, Elena's first baby tooth, locks of hair from both of them, and a thick brown envelope sealed with a red wax seal. On the front, in Clara's neat, elegant handwriting, it said, "For my love, Vicente. Open only when I am gone. When all seems lost. My heart skipped a beat. When all seems lost. There couldn't be a more accurate description of the present. With utmost care, almost reverently, I broke the wax seal. Inside there were several handwritten pages and an official document, signed and sealed by a notary. It was Clara's will. A will I didn't know about, that Elena evidently didn't know about. My eyes, clouded by tears, scanned the typewritten letter, full of legal terminology. But one clause, highlighted, stood out above all others. I read it once, twice. I couldn't believe it. A laugh, rough, harsh, laden with all the bitterness and irony in the world, burst from my chest. It was a strange sound, one I hadn't made in months. I laughed until my sides hurt, until tears of pain mixed with those of black, devastating humor. I put the documents back in the box and hid it again in the closet. A strange calm, serene and full of silent expectation, took hold of me. The desperation had given way to a patience of steel. I would wait. I would wait for her to come. Monday dawned cold and clear. At 10 o'clock sharp, as announced, a sleek black car stopped in front of the house. Elena got out, impeccable as always, in a long camel coat. Behind her, a young man in a suit with a tablet under his arm. One of her lawyers, I assumed. They entered without knocking. I was sitting at the head of the dining room table, dressed in my old wool sweater, Clara's favorite. I hadn't shaved in days. I must have looked like a ghost, but for the first time in weeks, I felt completely present. Elena looked around. The suitcases that Maria reluctantly had packed for me were by the door. "I see you've been sensible," she said with cold satisfaction. "The car is waiting. We'll sign the final sales papers at the residence. A notary is waiting." The young man took out a folder and placed it on the table. He opened a page marked with a red tab and offered me an expensive pen. "Mr. Vicente, if you would be so kind, right here," he said in a neutral voice. I looked at the document. Then I looked at Elena. Her eyes challenged me, impatient. "Before I sign," I said, in a voice firmer than I expected, "there's one last thing I must do. A last wish of your mother's." Elena frowned. "What are you talking about, Father? We don't have time for nonsense." It was very important to her, I insisted, maintaining my calm. "She asked me that. On the day I left this house forever." I read a letter from her out loud. "Here, in this dining room, with the family present." I paused, loading the words with meaning. "You're all the family I have left, Elena. Would you deny me this last wish?" She sighed, exasperated. She exchanged a look with the lawyer, who shrugged almost imperceptibly. "Quickly, please. The notary won't wait all day." I nodded. I stood up slowly and walked to the study. Each step was measured, deliberate. I took the wooden box, carried it back to the dining room, and placed it on the table, next to the sales contract. I opened it. Elena's look was one of bored disdain, but when I took out the brown envelope, with the broken wax seal, something in her posture changed. She straightened up slightly. "What is that?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Your mother's last will," I said simply. "The real one." Her face fell. The disdain turned to confusion, and then to an alarming pallor. "What? That's impossible." The lawyers checked everything. There was no additional will. "Clearly they didn't check thoroughly enough," I said, unfolding the pages. "Or they didn't look in the right place." Clara was always meticulous about hiding her most prized possessions. The young lawyer cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir, but any subsequent will should have been filed." "And read it. And be quiet," I interrupted him, with an authority that silenced him immediately. I wasn't the decrepit, defeated old man. I was Vicente, Clara's husband, the patriarch of this house, however dilapidated it was. Elena stood rigid as a statue. Her breathing had quickened almost imperceptibly. her gloved hands clenched into fists at her sides. I started to read. The first page was a letter to me, full of her love, her tenderness, her concern for my well-being, words that comforted me and broke my heart at the same time. Then I came to the legal part, and regarding my assets, which consist of the property located at number 27, Camino de los Alamos, including the main house, the annexed lands, and all its belongings. I paused, looking up at Elena. Her eyes were fixed on me, wide. The blood had drained completely from her face, giving her a cadaverous pallor. I leave in full and exclusive inheritance to my beloved husband, Vicente Alonso Garcia, for it to be his refuge and his home until the end of his days. A gasp escaped Elena's lips. That's not valid. It's old. The communal property. Silence, I ordered, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I had. I returned to the document. Additionally, I specify and clarify that under no circumstances may the property be sold, mortgaged, or transferred without Vicente's express and written consent while he lives. The room was in absolute silence. You could hear the ticking of the old pendulum clock in the living room. I kept reading, each word a nail in the coffin of my daughter's ambitions. In the unwanted but possible event that my daughter Elena Alonso Mendez attempts during Vicente's lifetime to dispossess him of his home, challenge this will, or exert any pressure or legal action to alter these wishes, then I paused dramatically. My eyes met hers, which were wide with growing panic. Then, and only in that case, all the material inheritance that would correspond to her, including, but not limited to the shares in the family business, the Mendez family jewels, and the capital in bank accounts in my name, will be revoked and donated in full to the Clara and Vicente Foundation, dedicated to the care of destitute elderly people, the creation of which is detailed in Annex B of this document. The sound that came from Elena's mouth was a stifled moan, a mix of incredulity and absolute horror. She brought a gloved hand to her mouth. She trembled. The days following Elena's departure were of a deep and strange quietude. The house, now irrevocably mine, seemed to be holding its breath. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind against the windows, was a sigh of relief, mixed with an ancient sorrow. I was the king of a castle of memories, an old and tired monarch, whose only servant was silence. Maria came as always, but our dynamic had changed. She was no longer the cleaner, consoling an old widower. She looked at me with a new respect, mixed with a hint of fear, as if I had unleashed a force she didn't quite understand. I asked her not to come every day. I needed to get used to the solitude I had chosen, or that had been chosen for me. Clara's will rested on the bedside table, in a clear plastic sleeve to protect it. I read it every night, not for the legal clauses that had defeated Elena, but for the love letter that headed it. Her words gave me strength, and at the same time reopened the wound of her absence again and again. One afternoon, as the setting sun tinted the walls a dying honey color, I decided to do what scared me the most. Go up to the attic. It was the last corner of the house that hadn't been profaned by the conflict with Elena, Clara's final sanctuary. There, she kept her unfinished sewing projects, the fabric she collected for a future that never came, Elena's dresses from when she was a child. The stairs creaked under my weight, protesting the intrusion. The air was thick, laden with the smell of old wood, mothballs, and decades of dust. A single bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, and when I pulled the cord, it bathed the space in a yellowish, sad light. There it all was, boxes labeled in her neat handwriting, Winter Wool 98, Blue Silk Tablecloth Project, assorted buttons. My heart constricted. It was so her, so meticulous, so full of plans. In a corner, set apart, was a smaller cardboard box, unlabeled, curiosity. That last ember of life I had left urged me to open it. Inside, there were no fabrics or skeins. There were more memories. Older, yellowed photographs, letters tied with a ribbon, and at the bottom, a hardcover notebook, covered in fabric printed with little blue flowers. I didn't recognize it. I took it carefully, feeling the weight of time in my hands. I sat on an old trunk, ignoring the dust that rose like a ghost, and opened the notebook to a random page. Clara's handwriting smiled at me from the paper. It was her diary. June 15th, 1963. Today Vicente gave me a bouquet of daisies. He says they are like me, simple and pretty. He blushed when he said it. I gave him a kiss that left him breathless. I think this is the man I'm going to marry. A sad smile touched my lips. I kept reading, page after page, a torrent of love, dreams, small frustrations, and great joys. Elena's birth, her first steps, our first house. It was the story of our life, told through her eyes, and it was even more beautiful than I remembered. Then the entries began to space out. The years passed. The handwriting sometimes trembled a little. March 3rd, 2005. Elena has announced she's moving to the city. The apartment is small. She says no room for us. Vicente has pretended he doesn't care, but I saw his heart shrink. This house is going to feel very empty. January 10th, 2010. Elena's Christmas visit was tense. She only talks about money, investments, how much this property is worth, and how little we utilize it. Vicente got angry. They had a terrible argument. Sometimes I look at my daughter, and I don't recognize the girl I raised. What did we do wrong? The pain returned, sharp and precise. Clara had seen it. She had felt it all, and she had written it down. February 14th, 2018. I've started to forget things. Small things, but they scare me. I told Vicente it's just age, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He knows me too well. I must put things in order, for him, for my Vicente. Here the handwriting became firmer, more decided. May 20th, 2018. I saw a lawyer today, in secret. I drafted the will. Vicente would never understand. He would think I'm being paranoid, or that I distrust our daughter. But I've seen how she looks at me when she thinks I'm not looking. I've heard her questions about the deeds, the life insurance. She is my daughter, and I love her with all my soul. But love is sometimes not enough to overcome ambition. I must protect Vicente. I must protect our home. It's all we have. Tears clouded my vision. Clara, my brave Clara, fighting the fog, clouding her mind to throw me one last bridge to safety. I turned the pages with trembling fingers. The last entry was dated just a few months before the illness took her completely. October 30th, 2022. Today was a good day. I remembered my granddaughter Laura's name for hours. I sewed a button on Vicente's shirt, small victories. I reread the will. It's good. It's harsh. But it's my last stitch, the last thread with which I try to sew the pieces of this family back together so they don't completely unravel when I'm gone. I pray that Elena never forces Vicente to use it. I pray that the love she once had for us overcomes the greed that now consumes her. But if not, if she forces him, then let it be her lesson, and mine, for not knowing how to give her the love she needed. The entry ended there. The rest of the pages were blank. I remained seated on the trunk, the diary open on my knees, crying silently. These weren't tears of rage or relief. They were tears of understanding. Clara hadn't done this out of vengeance. It hadn't been an act of favoritism. It had been an act of desperate love for the two people she loved most in the world. For me to protect me, and for Elena to try to save her from herself, even from the grave. It was the seamstress's last stitch, clumsy and painful, but made with the hope that it would hold the fabric of our family together. I came down from the attic with the diary in my hand, feeling 100 years older and at the same time, at peace for the first time since her death. The revelation didn't change what had happened. Elena had chosen her path. But I understood Clara's why, and that was a different kind of inheritance. More painful perhaps, but truer. 2 weeks later, on a quiet afternoon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't Elena's strident, prolonged ring. It was a timid, almost apologetic touch. Upon opening the door, I didn't find my daughter. I found Laura, my granddaughter. She was dressed in jeans and a simple jacket, no trace of her mother's ostentation. Her eyes, the same clear eyes as Elena and Clara, were swollen and full of an anxiety that broke my heart in two. "Hello, Grandpa," she said, her voice a thread of sound. "Laura," I murmured, too surprised to say anything else. I had seen little of her in recent years. Elena always said she was too busy with her studies, her friends, her life. "Can I come in?" she asked, wringing her hands. I nodded and stepped aside to let her enter. She walked to the center of the living room and stood there, looking around as if seeing the house for the first time. Her eyes settled on the photograph on the side table, the one of the three of us. "I've come because Mom is devastated," she began, not looking at me. "She doesn't eat, she doesn't sleep, she just cries. And I'm ashamed to say it, but at first I was furious with you. I thought you had been cruel to her." She fell silent, breathing deeply. I just waited, my heart pounding hard against my chest. But then, she started talking, saying things I didn't understand, about this house, about Grandma, about how she always felt second best growing up, like she was never enough for you. Finally she looked at me. "Is that true, Grandpa? Did you never love her enough?" The question hit me like a punch in the stomach. Is that what Elena felt? Clara's diary came to mind. What did we do wrong? "Oh, honey, no," I said, and my voice failed me. "No, we loved your mother more than anything in this world. Maybe we loved her so much, we made a terrible mistake." "What mistake?" asked Laura, with the brutal innocence of youth. "The mistake of thinking our love was obvious, that it didn't need to be said. We were so dedicated to each other, and to her, in a practical way. We gave her all the material things she could need, educated her, cared for her, but maybe we didn't show her, didn't tell her enough how proud we were of her, how much we admired her. Your grandmother and I, we were from another time. We believed love was demonstrated by working, building a home, not talking about feelings. It was the hardest truth I'd ever had to admit. Clara and I, in our fairy tale idyll, had failed. We had created a void in our daughter that ambition and money had filled." Laura nodded slowly, as if something finally fit. "She says that you lived in a bubble, that she was always an intruder in your love story." "No, never." "I know, Grandpa. I know," she interrupted softly. "I've been reading Grandma's letters, the ones she wrote to you, the ones she wrote to Mom when she was in college. Mom keeps them all. I've spent the last week reading them. And I saw something else. I saw the love. It's in every line, in every silly question about whether she was eating well, in every newspaper clipping Grandma sent her about something she might find interesting." Her eyes filled with tears. Mom could only see the bubble. She could never see the love that held it up from the outside. We stood in silence, both of us, crying for the same woman from opposite sides of a family trench. "Do you know about the will?" I asked finally, cautiously. Laura nodded. "I know, and at first it seemed horrible to me. But then I read the last entry in Grandma's diary. I froze." "You have the diary?" She took from her purse a notebook identical to the one I had found, the one with the flowered covers. "Mom has had it since the day of the funeral. She found it among Grandma's things. She's been reading it in secret all these months. That's why she acted like that. She was hurt and scared. She thought Grandma in the end really didn't trust her, that she saw her as a monster, and that enraged her even more. She wanted to prove she was strong, that she didn't need her love or her approval, that she could take what she wanted. The world spun around me. Elena knew. She knew about the will, or at least about the diary. She had acted not only out of greed, but out of a painful adolescent rage toward a mother she believed had judged and condemned her from her deathbed. She didn't kick me out just for the house, did she, Grandpa? Whispered Laura. She kicked me out because I've always been more like Grandma. I like to sew. I like the quiet. And that hurts, Mom. It reminds her of everything she believes she never had. The truth, complete and devastating, finally broke through. It wasn't a story of villains and heroes. It was a tragedy of misunderstandings, of unexpressed love, of wounds that fester over time until they poison everything around them. What do we do now, Laura? I asked. And for the first time, my voice sounded like that of a lost old man. She came to me and took my hand, the same one that had trembled holding the cold cup of tea weeks ago. Now in hers, it felt firm and warm. Now, Grandpa, she said, with a sad smile, but full of a determination she inherited from her grandmother. Now we bring her home, not to this house of stone, to the other one, to the one you and Grandma built for her, and that she never knew how to see. We bring her home, for real. And I knew, looking into my granddaughter's eyes, Clara's eyes filled with a new courage, that my wife's last stitch hadn't failed. It hadn't sewn a definitive closure. It had sewn a painful seam, yes, but one that allowed for healing. She had left a loose thread, the most important one. Laura's, the generation that could understand both sides of the story. The ending wasn't unexpected, because it was happy or sad. It was unexpected, because it wasn't the end of a battle, but the beginning of a reconstruction. Slow, painful, full of scars, but possible. Because in the end, the most valuable inheritance Clara and I left wasn't a house or land. It was love, and love, even when it twists, even when it hides under layers of pain and ambition, never completely dies. It just waits, silently, for someone to have the courage to unearth it and give it a second chance. Laura squeezed my hand and smiled. And in that smile, I saw the future. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be ours. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel alone.